What is going on, comic fam? It is your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined again by comic creator David Pepose. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be a couple of bearded comic bros together today.
Right? Yeah, we're just some bearded bros talking about comics.
It's the best way to spend the day.
Nothing better, right? So I had you on the show back in like December. You had just had your successful Kickstarter of the Oz. You were getting ready to launch Scouts Honor with Aftershock, and we're going to be talking about another Kickstarter here just a little bit that you dropped today, actually. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. No, I'm super thrilled to chat about. Yeah, we're gonna have our second double-sized issue of the OZ, and yeah, it's launching today on Kickstarter. If you haven't backed it, you can visit bit.ly/the OZ comic or the OZ comic 2. I have two different links that'll take you to the same place. And yeah, you can back our campaign. For those who don't know about the series, I described the OZ as what if Mad Max took place in the Wizard of Oz? It's about Dorothy Gale's granddaughter, who's a disillusioned Iraq War veteran who finds herself swept up in a tornado and stranded in the war-torn land of Oz. And she finds out that when her grandmother killed the Wicked Witch of the West and then convinced the Wizard of Oz to leave and then split herself, it caused like a horrible power vacuum that led to just decades of brutal civil war. And so now this new Dorothy is going to have to navigate her grandmother's former friends, the Tin Soldier, the Courageous Lion, the Scarecrow, if she hopes to bring peace to the occupied zone, or as the locals call it, the OZ.
That's so freaking good, gang. The double size issue one was fantastic, and I remember reading it, and I forgot that it was a double size issue. So I finished the first, and I was like, "No, that can't be it." I was like, "If you end it right now, I'm gonna be so mad." And then you're like, "All right, I got another issue." I was so salty at first. I was like, "Son of a gun! If he ends it right now."
No, thank you. It's so funny because so I've written the whole series. The whole series is written. We have the story done. It's just it's a matter of getting the art put together,
Right.
and I always say like it's much easier for a writer to write a script than an artist to draw it. It's physical labor. There's a whole lot of moving parts that even I'm not cognizant of. And on top of that, Ruben Rojas, a terrific artist. We want to make sure that he has the time to do what he needs to do. But also, there were some COVID-related delays to our production schedule that I think that's happened all over the industry. Somebody gets sick or somebody's spouse loses their job, and it makes things a little bit slower. But that's why I'm really thrilled with this campaign. We've been taking our time to really kind of get a critical mass of artwork together before we launch. And I'm telling you, this book is going to be worth the wait. Yeah, and we've got some really exciting rewards for people. If you missed our first campaign, don't worry. We've got digital and print catch-up tiers, so you can get issues 1 and 2 bundled together, either electronically or physically. And for our first 48 hours, we'll have some really cool early bird specials as well. So if you want to get the OZ at a discount price, the first 48 hours are the best time to do it. But yeah, we've got all sorts of fun things to share with our Yellow Brick Road warriors, and I can't wait to see them hopefully come back to Kickstarter.
Yeah. And again, if you forgot anything that David said about what the link is, it's in the description of this video. So after we're done talking and you're done watching this video, click that link so you can go and support, because you right now, if you are watching it when this airs, you are still able to get those early bird prices, and that's huge. You get the discount, it helps you out saving money, and then it helps David and the creative team out with their Kickstarter. So support that right off the bat. Earlier, the better.
It's a little behind the scenes, but I always feel like knowledge is empowerment. And for Kickstarter, the first 48 hours of the campaign are the most important. That's what gets us ranked in Kickstarter's algorithm. And for those who have heard me on this show before or have heard me anywhere else, I consider myself an evangelist for comics. The money is not the important thing for me here. The important thing for me are the number of readers we have. I want to share this story with as many people as possible. I want to introduce them to Dorothy and the Tin Soldier and Jack Pumpkinhead and the Prince of Lions and the Scarecrow and Toto. And that you backing this campaign in the first 48 hours, that's how more and more and more people get introduced to the OZ. So any amount helps. Every dollar counts. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not about money for me. I'm spending that on artists. It's about just getting more people to read the book. So thanks.
Absolutely. So you mentioned Ruben already. Is the whole creative team back from volume 1 back for this run again?
Yeah. Ruben and Whitney and Dave, not to mention our Murderers Row of cover talent. We've got Mon House coming back from our last Kickstarter. I don't think it's a secret that Mon's cover was far and away the most popular variant we had during our last campaign. I think it outsold every other cover we had by like 3 or 4 to 1. And so we have him joined by Fareed Karimi, who you might know from Night Gwen over at Marvel. He's also doing an issue of Luke Cage. He's got an incredible looking cover that our colorist Roche did an amazing job on that. And then Sem Iraz from The Pride. You might not be aware of Sem's work, but he is doing a truly amazing homage to Spectacular Spider-Man number 200 with his variant cover featuring the Prince of Lions versus Jack Pumpkinhead. That's a cover I've wanted to do for a very long time. And he just really knocked it out of the park, even did his own colors for it. And yeah, that's sort of the tip of the iceberg. It's one of those things. We're talking a little bit before the Kickstarter starts, so I'm not trying to sort of put all my eggs in one basket. But if we're as lucky as we were with the last campaign and we managed to blow through our goals, we have a number of stretch goal ideas in mind and a few things in our back pocket. For example, if you really liked our Winged Monkey Squadron pins, you may want to keep an eye on that Kickstarter because we might have something even cooler than that as a stretch goal. If you liked our song, our theme song, Heart of Tin, you might want to keep your ear to the ground because we might have something cool in store. If you liked our print by Kira Okamoto, we've got something pretty cool in store. So yeah, it's one of those things. I'm trying to incentivize readers to keep spreading the word, to keep hitting those goals. And unlike the last Kickstarter where I was woefully unprepared for that sort of thing, I've taken the year to really think it over, to really kind of get our ducks in a row. And we've got some really fun things in store. We hope that if we build it, the readers will come. But our Emerald Army hasn't let us down once, and I don't think they're going to let us down here either.
Well, I mean, with what you bring to the table with your writing, it's hard to have your army let you down because, gang, David is one of those. When David creates something, I'm like, I've got to check it out because you have the OZ, Spencer and Locke 2. Good golly, are punch me in my nostalgia feels freaking comic books. And then you just had the hit with Scout's Honor, which with Aftershock, like and then we didn't even talk about Going to the Chapel, like nonstop, just great books. And what I love about them is there's such unique concepts that you create and unique stories. So I want to talk a little about some of those others if people are new, but before we get off the OZ, how did this idea, because you're like Mad Max, Wizard of Oz comes together. And I feel like you take, that's something that you do really well. You take properties that we're very familiar with and you combine them. Like, I did not expect that. And this is one. So where did this idea for the OZ come from, of combining those properties and things like that?
Some of it is I get restless. And so I like jumping from genre to genre, because it keeps me limber and it sort of keeps readers on their toes a little bit. And sometimes that makes it hard to market me because I don't like to fit in a box. But that way, if I can bounce from a crime story to a fantasy story to a sci-fi to horror or whatever, it keeps me interested and it keeps me from getting burned out. So after Spencer and Locke Volume 1 came out, I had come up with 3 ideas. And one of them was Spencer and Locke 2, and one was Going to the Chapel. And I was like, well, I kind of want to do something that's not just crime. I love crime.
Yeah.
writing crime, not committing crime. But I wanted to do something a little different. Sci-fi has always been a challenge for me. That's my hardest genre by a wide margin, because it's so broad and there's so many things you can do. But you also have to be like very smart and very methodical about it. I love fantasy because the characterization can really inform the theme and it can inform the rules of the world. So I just started writing down fantasy inspirations, things like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and I wrote down The Wizard of Oz. And it was my cursor. My cursor got stuck. It got stuck in the word Oz, and I just started thinking. I was like, "What if Oz was an acronym?" And I just started thinking, what's OZ? What could that stand for? And I thought occupied zone, and immediately, like the whole thing crystallized. I mean, that cover that Ruben Rojas did for our first issue, which is actually right behind your head, that was pretty much the image I had in my head. And I realized, oh, this isn't just a fantasy book; it's a war story. And that's when the ideas really started pouring out of me. I mean, I consider it to be a spiritual cousin to Spencer and Locke, but sort of at a much larger scale.
Right.
And arguably, I mean, I think everybody, who's read a comic, most of them know who Calvin and Hobbes are. But I feel like The Wizard of Oz is like a whole other level of cultural osmosis. Everybody's heard of the Judy Garland film, if nothing else. And so these archetypes, they're hardwired into the national psyche. And so you're able to take those archetypes, which are so resilient, and you're able to remix them in a way that feels new, but still feels organic to the original. And so, yeah, it's one of the faster stories I've ever written. It just, I hit that groove really fast, and I think it's reflective of just the really rich mythology that L. Frank Baum wrote in those original novels, and just showing that they're iconic and they're long lasting, but there's still so many different angles that you can approach.
Yeah.
I consider this honestly one of the best books I've ever written, and one of the best projects I've ever been involved in. And I can tell you, my team, they haven't let me down once.
That's awesome. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned like you say Wizard of Oz. It's a staple. People know it, right? There's the movies. It was in the MGM studios right in Florida. Like it just has been a pop culture nonstop.
Yeah.
And it feels like it allows you to play with a property that people are familiar with, kind of like, hey, I can go and change the narrative and jump into it a lot faster because you guys are already familiar with some of the players that are in this story.
Yeah.
You just switch them, which is great.
Yeah. It's, and some of it also, especially with The Wizard of Oz, I mean, I think something that a lot of people think of, especially with the Judy Garland film, they think, it's innocent. It's a product of another time. And for me, I like just kind of cranking the volume up and like just injecting like all the angst and all the action and all like kind of the tear jerking emotional arcs to it. And so the more innocuous, they always say it's always the quiet ones. The more innocuous the source material, the more I'm able to sort of really crank up the volume. And so I'm always thinking like, what's the chocolate and the peanut butter that I can put together? Like I'll never say I'm smart enough to invented the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like I didn't invent peanut butter and I didn't invent jelly. I'm just the idiot who put it together. And so, what's the pineapple pizza of it all? And usually if I come up with a combination that like kind of makes me laugh, but then like I'm like, oh no, something clicks. I usually let it percolate, a month or two just to make sure that like I actually like it and it actually has legs. But if I can remember it in a couple of months, then I know, okay, this is something. And that's usually when the fun starts.
So we literally just figured out your philosophy. You take our childhood dreams that are innocent and pure, and you're like, how can I just go deep? Wizard of Oz, Calvin and Hobbes, the Boy Scouts. You're like, I'm going to take these innocent ideals and just
take the childhood level. It's for me. It's what's the imagery. I really gravitate towards things with really strong imagery, and that's why you can see, Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes, The Wizard of Oz, weddings, the Boy Scouts. When you think of those things, there's a lot of imagery that immediately hits you. And now that's kind of the landmarks that I use when it comes to structuring my work. For example, Going to the Chapel, which for those who haven't read the book, it's like Die Hard meets Wedding Crashers. It's about a bride who becomes the ringleader of her own hostage situation to get out of walking down the aisle. And I remember in particular, we are in our third issue, Emily, the bride, she's kind of playing both sides. You know, she's working with the bad Elvis gang to try to escape her own wedding, while not actually telling her family or her fiance Jesse any of this. And so at one point, the wedding guests revolt, and so suddenly Emily finds herself on the run, literally from a wedding registry. And it's like that kind of imagery, that's sort of, are using all the doves that they had for the wedding. They use it as a smoke screen so the police snipers can't shoot them. Like those are kind of like fun. They're funny beats, but they're also like, oh, like, I hadn't thought of it like that. You could say improvised weaponry is like a big part of my work. But yeah, it's just finding that imagery and just seeing like what else could be done with it. That really helps inform my work in a big way. And the books that I have written that don't have that baked in sort of imagery, those are the ones that take a lot longer to write, because remembering is so much easier than inventing whole cloth.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I tend to gravitate towards something that's already got some imagery already baked in.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I remember after our dialogue in December, I hadn't read Going to Chapel yet, and so instantly I was like, I've got to, because I think I'd read Spencer Locke. I hadn't read Spencer Locke 2 yet. And I was like, well, I got to read Spencer Locke 2. I got to read Going to Chapel. And yeah, it just is. Again, you create worlds that I can't put it down. Like I want to read it, and I'm like, I get mad at you when the book ends because I want more.
Thank you. Chapel especially, Chapel, I would say Chapel is the hardest book I've ever written at this point, just because there's like heists are already tough. Cause like, plotting is like the hard part for me. That's one of the bigger challenges I have in my writing. And heists are so plot driven where you got to figure out, okay, he has to do point A to get to point B to point C to point D. And then, like an idiot, I did a cast of 15 people in one location. And so Gavin Guidry, the artist in the book, and we actually did he built a fully three-dimensional chapel in SketchUp. And so we did essentially a football play of the whole series, where I'm like, okay, Emily's going to go here, Tom's going to go here, Jesse's going to be here in this scene. And then we kind of broke that down scene to scene where all the characters were. And so it took a long time to really hash that out.
Yeah.
I think I wrote that outline. It had to have been like 6 months. But once the play-by-play especially was hammered out, the scripting went by like really fast. I think I wrote the thing in 6 weeks.
Okay.
But that was because scripting to me, outlining is really like all the real writing for me. Scripting is just kind of like, how do I cut it up? And how do I like play with the rhythm? And are there any riffs I want to add to the mix? But yeah, it was the hardest thing I've ever written. It's not to say I wouldn't love to revisit the Bad Elvis Gang at some point. I mean, I have an idea in my back pocket. But it would have to be, Gavin would have to be interested and available. Colorist Liz Kramer would have to be interested and available. Letterer Ariana Mayer would have to be interested and available. And we're all busy. We all got a lot of plates to be spinning. But never say never is what I always say. I always just, I always feel guilty because I'm still working on the third and final volume for Spencer and Locke. And it's just, I apologize every time I talk about it. I wrote volumes 1 and 2 almost back to back. I did not have any other books in the middle of that. Since Spencer and Locke 2, I've written 7 books, 8 books. And the thing is, I'm trying to bring all the lessons I've learned from those books to volume 3. Spencer and Locke is a book that changed my life. If for your listeners who haven't read it, it's what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City. It's about a hard-boiled detective whose partner's his childhood imaginary friend. And it's my baby. It's my firstborn. It's a book that I find to be incredibly special to me as a creator and as a reader and as a fan. And seeing how people have responded to that book, I hold that as a high responsibility. And so what I can say, we're doing a Garfield-themed serial killer is picking off the Peanuts gang. And Spencer and Locke, we left them in a pretty bad spot at the end of the second volume. And so they're going to have to kind of really pick up the pieces to find this killer before it's too late. But there's that's like climbing Everest 3 times. I don't think you can get any more iconic than Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes and Charles Schultz's Peanuts and Jim Davis's Garfield.
Nope.
And so there's we were talking about the imagery. That's almost like an overload. And it's figuring out, how does this all fit together? How can I hit the maximum amount of stuff that people would expect in a way that makes like any sort of coherent sense, on top of juggling a lot of stuff, a lot of other stuff. And so it's coming. I promise. I say this to artist Jorge Santiago Jr. every chance I get. It is coming. I promise. I'm working on it. But I also feel like when you see some of the books that are coming out, including the OZ, you'll be like, I get it. Okay. I know why he's overextended himself a tiny bit. And that's probably not going to change anytime soon. But Spencer and Locke is always my baby. And I am committed to making sure that we end that series on the perfect note, because that's what the readership deserves.
Yeah. I will tell you this, gang. I will be the first one to bring David back onto the show as soon as, I mean, obviously, if you have other stuff coming out and it's not a long time, you can come on any other time. But as soon as Spencer and Locke 3, I will be like, we're talking about it because we got
as it's out, because it's my baby.
Yeah.
And I can't wait. I've known the ending of that series since before I met Jorge. I know the ending for the series. And it's just sort of, all the fine tuning to get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're working hard on it. It's just a lot of homework, a lot of research, the best kind. Can't complain. Sure beats digging ditches.
That's right. Well, it's interesting because we talked about how Wizard of Oz, how that's a world that people are familiar with. Yeah. My wife is not an avid comic reader. Like I just got to read her first comic book the other day.
Saw that.
But like she had, when we first met, I'm gonna pull it up here. This sucker's a beast. She had the collective trade of Calvin and Hobbes.
Collections upstairs in my office.
And this sucker's massively heavy, gang. Like I could do curls with this and get in shape. But that's like she's like, I read that, but I don't read comics. Well, those are like, but it's interesting to how much it ties into culture. You're talking Calvin and Hobbes, you're talking Peanuts, Garfield. People are familiar with those properties, with those IPs, right? And I think it just is a lot of fun when you get to then take those and merge them together with, like you said, like a Sin City esque. You're like, who would have thought of that? But whoever thought of it came together and it works out really well.
It's a love letter to my upbringing in a lot of ways. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, home of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. They used to have a really great comic section. They were a Hearst newspaper. I grew up reading Calvin and Hobbes and Beetle Bailey and Peanuts and Garfield. And that was sort of, even before I was buying comics of my own, I was seeing those every day in the paper, and my mom would, she'd cut out all the Calvin and Hobbes strips. She still has them all over her house, and she had them in her office. And as a kid, you read Calvin and Hobbes and you're just like, oh, this is cool. Like, and it's funny. And then you revisit as an adult and you realize like what a trailblazer that Bill Watterson was. And continues to be, even sort of in the height of his seclusion. And I think that was the thing, seeing him and old school Frank Miller, which that was the first comics creator whose voice so stood out at me as a kid. That I realized like, oh, these aren't made by committee. Like there are real creators who make these things, real authors and real artists. And so seeing these two trailblazers who each have a very subversive sense of humor, that was sort of the common ground between the two of them. Yeah. And I consider myself, I also have a little bit of a subversive sense of humor, and I try to just say like, where's the emotional heart to this? So it's not just like edgelord stuff. So it's not like shock for shock value's sake. Right. That I think is the thing that lets me get away with some of the more, some more of my enthusiastic excesses. But yeah, it was a love letter to two pioneers. Yeah. And I feel like we stood on the shoulders of giants for that book. And it, my goal and Jorge's goal was always to tell it as respectfully as we could. You can still make Sacred Hamburger in a way that is not disrespectful to the cow, Maybe that's my Jewish upbringing. Talking about the rules of keeping kosher and how it's always supposed to be about like you don't inflict unnecessary pain and suffering to an animal. But yeah, I think just trying to be respectful of the source material and to show that like I grew up reading this stuff. I love it just as much as anybody else, if not more so, since I've dedicated my life to it. And yeah, it's just seeing the response to that book. I didn't know if I was going to be able to tell another comic story. I thought for sure I was going to get run out of the industry. I thought for sure every issue came out, I woke up in a cold sweat saying, "Is this the one they turned on us?" And no, they got what we were doing, and I'll always be grateful for it. And yeah, like I said, it's a book that changed my life, and I'm so thrilled that it got to see the light of day.
Absolutely, and we are all thrilled for that. So we've talked a lot about, we've been talking Spencer a lot. You started off the show talking about the OZ, which is your Kickstarter. Again, gang, you haven't, that's fine. Don't click the yet. We're still talking. But after this video is over, go click the link. Go support the Kickstarter.
Back it. If you missed the first one, we got catch up options for you.
But last time I had you on the show, you were getting ready to launch your book with Aftershock, Scout's Honor, which also is, I believe it's coming out in trade very soon. I think like you can still get it on pre-order if you are watching this right now. And
final order cutoff should be sometime today.
Okay.
And yeah, you can order it through your local comic shop. The pre-order code is JUL for July 211246.
So what is that experience like? Because I have creators on all the time that dabble with both. What is it for you of where like a Kickstarter where it's kind of like it feels like you have more control, like this is your world you create, where then working with a publisher like Aftershock who does great stuff, like how does your style of writing or like producing the comic change, or does it change, or aspects?
No, it's a great question. I mean, because so Kickstarter, it's very empowering, but it's all on you. The reason I had launched the OZ on Kickstarter was we had 2 issues of the OZ done, and we had shopped it around, and we had a lot of near sort of successes with it. But the thing with publishers is they're busy people, and so if there's a fire that suddenly breaks out, they got to run and catch it. And acquisitions are not. It's just a matter of timing as much as it is whether or not it's of professional quality. And meanwhile, I'm one of my best friends in comics is Charlie Stickney, co-publisher at Scout and the creator of White Ash. And he had been telling me for months, you really should do a Kickstarter. You really should do a Kickstarter. And the thing that really the made the light bulb go off was he said, there are people they're the Wednesday warriors. They go to the comic shop every week. But there are some people who, no matter what you do, will never step foot in a comic shop. It's just not conducive to the way they live. Some people only buy their books through Kickstarter. Some of them only buy them online through Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Comixology. Some people only consume through Webtoons or buy them only at cons. And he said, there's a whole demographic of readership you've done no outreach to. And so the thing that really, it was the catalyst was, COVID, everything shut down. Diamond had their shutdown. Cons were shut down. A lot of people were sort of rethinking, how are they going to do this? And I realized, we could solve one problem with another. Like we have the OZ and we can use that to introduce ourselves to the Kickstarter community with a book that I consider to be our absolute A game. And so, the difference being is like you're sort of a one-man band. I'm not just the writer. I'm the editor. I'm the financier. I'm the publicist. I'm the guy who's interfacing with the printer. I'm the guy who's handling the fulfillment. I did all the fulfillment in a 2-bedroom with a brand new puppy. It was crazy. Aftershock, what I love about working with them is you have that infrastructure in place. I've known one of my editors, Mike Martz, since I was in college. I interned for Mike at DC Comics when he was the Batman editor. So I worked on Batman RIP under Mike. So when Mike announced that he was making the leap to Aftershock, and that they had announced Aftershock with him as editor-in-chief, I immediately was like, okay, that's a publisher that's interesting to me, because I know Mike and I trust Mike. And so working with him and editor Christina Harrington, who really took point on our series, and she's just an amazing champion for our book and for so many others. What's interesting is, like you said, you see some elements of control.
Right.
And I used to sort of look at that as like a dirty word. And now, having gone through the experience, and I think being a little bit more mature as a writer, you realize like, oh no, like what your goal is as a creator in that situation, especially, um, you have your criteria, you have your agenda as a creator that you want to hit. And then meanwhile, there are certain directives that your publisher needs, whether it's for sales purposes or just for something that they need of you. And your job as a creator is to find the overlap, where you say, okay, I want to hit these points that the publisher might need to sell the book, but I want to do it in a way that makes me happy.
Mm.
And so, for example, I've never had a creative team match made for me before. And so, working with artist Luca Casalinguida, that was fantastic. I was aware of Luca's work. I had hit him up for a previous book, and he was working on a small independent title called James Bond at the time. I'd already hit up Luca years ago, and so when Mike had said, "Here's some artists that are available," Luca immediately, like, I was like, "Oh yeah, I know Luca. Let's do it." And I remember Christina saying, "Hey, we need to do a colorist. How do you feel about Matt Milla?" And I remember saying, "Oh, are we allowed to do that?" Like, that's the best part about working with a publisher, is creators who you might not have thought would be available to you.
Mm.
Uh, just a really just high caliber of talent. No, they have these relationships with these editors. And I can tell you, as somebody who's very hard on his colorists, I think I can count on one hand the number of notes I ever had from Matt.
Yeah.
I mean, and he did just a terrific job with on Luca's work. And so, there's certainly differences in the pacing of it all, because you're not the central editorial conduit anymore. And so there is a little bit of a game of telephone involved for sure. Where like the letterer, in our case, Carlos Manguel, we'll turn in pages to Christina and Mike, and then they'll send them to me, and I'll be like, okay, we only have time for a limited number of fixes. It's
Right.
not like a book like the previous books I've done, where like I don't rewrite the books, but like I'll often realize like, oh, I overwrote this page. I need to cut dialogue.
Yeah.
It's too dense. This is sort of, you have to really anticipate. You have to be nimble, and you have to be flexible. I mean, there's not the train is on the tracks, and you don't even have the time to be precious about things. Sometimes your artist will interpret things differently than you envision them. And in a book like the OZ, I can be picky. I have the time to be picky. We're churning out a book every 7 to 8 weeks, at a place like Aftershock. And so it's figuring out, okay, just because it's different from how you wrote it does
Right.
not mean it's bad. And realizing like, okay, how do I pivot a little bit to make sure that I'm not betraying the artwork
Right.
here? And like, for example, Scouts on something, a fun thing was our giant spider monster, Tenderfoot. He was a very different creature in the script. And when Luca sort of imagined that monster that way, I was kind of like, oh, that's cool. Like, all right, we got a giant spider here. Like, yeah, let's ride that thing like a horse. I kind of reworked that creature from the ground up
Yeah.
as a result. And we're doing that like on the fly. And it's a little exhilarating, and it's a little like a roller coaster, but I think it was a big learning experience for me as a creator, and it's something that I can say has really helped me out in future projects as well, is to just be like, no, this is a collaborative effort, and like sometimes like you don't have to be so precious. You can still put out quality content, but like you can compromise with your collaborators a little bit. I mean, that's really what collaboration is in a nutshell. But yeah, having sort of that infrastructure, it was a big learning curve for me. And being able to find ways that I could be a value add to that infrastructure, I think that's made me a better creator. I think it's made me a better citizen of the comics community.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And yeah, and I'm sure it makes me easier to work with. So yes, thank you to everybody at Aftershock for everything you did for Scouts Honor, and for toughening me up.
Nice. So we've talked a lot about almost all your comics. I feel like, which is great, and I want to always do that because I love talking about them. And we were talking about your Kickstarter with the OZ, And I hesitate to ask because you've mentioned the OZ that, with the Kickstarter going on, you've mentioned that you're working on Spencer and Locke 3. Is there any other fires that you got burning or things that you got talking about that you are can talk about, or
that I can talk? Well, yeah. No, there's one big thing that I'm hard at work on right now that it's the biggest thing in my career. I'm so excited about it. When you see it, you're gonna be like, that is very much a Pepose idea. So I'm really thrilled about that one. What are some things I could talk about? I mean, it's funny. It's like I have all these things that are sort of in development, and it's like across a variety of genres. There's Grand Theft Astro that's slated to come out through Top Cow. It's not on the schedule yet because we're still kind of putting art together on it. But that book has been long since written. It's just getting the trains on the tracks with the art of it. I'm thrilled about that one. That's Fast and the Furious meets Back to the Future meets Star Wars. Is the best way I can describe that book. Well, it's just, throughout human history, if we can drive it, people have raced it, whether that's horses or chariots or cars, or in this case, in the far future, single person spacecraft. And Hakeem Henriksen is the fastest star chaser in the galaxy. That's how he makes his bread. He's built himself an experimental quantum supercharger that he is unlucky enough to test during a race. And it rips open a wormhole that throws him 7 years into the future, and in a universe that has now long since left him in the dust. And so Hakeem is going to have to reunite with a family that has long since thought him dead. And he's going to have to embark on a faster than light heist for a piece of technology that might just bring him home. I love that book. Like I said, sci-fi is really hard for me. I've been just chomping at the bit for my sci-fi debut to come out because I think it's such a fun book. I feel like it's a little lighter on its feet than a book like Spencer and Locke or the OZ. It's not quite as like laugh out loud as Going to the Chapel, but it's just like a fun kind of popcorn action book. With some really fun characters, some really fun character dynamics, and just I think it speaks to my competitive side. For a character like Hakeem, especially, he's used to coming in first, and what happens when he finds himself now perpetually on the back foot and perpetually having to catch up. And sort of this idea of sort of self-interest versus selflessness. And how far is this guy going to go to be a criminal, to be a thief, to get what he wants, to get what he thinks is entitled to him. And so really fun cast of characters on that, really fun action sequences. As soon as we have a date on that, I'll be shouting it from the rooftops. It's been a long time coming with the art. Just a lot of things, a lot of COVID related stuff and other gigs popping up kind of stuff. But I'm really excited about that. I'm working on a few things that have been unannounced, from genres ranging from horror to comedy, and not in the vein of Going to the Chapel, almost like a Seth Rogen kind of vein, to a project that's really near and dear to my heart. I have a YA sci-fi thing that I'm working on that is fully written. We're just getting some really beautiful art on it now. I love it. I cannot wait for this book to come out. So as soon as that's ready, I can share some more stuff. I know we had come out with Roxy Rewind last year in the big hype anthology, and I know Jorge Santiago Jr. and I, we are still talking about doing more of it because Roxy is a character that predates Spencer and Locke. She's been in my mind for a very long time, and so I'd love to tell more stories with her. And just a few other things, some more crime. I'm working very hard on a crime thing that if it all comes together the way I'm hoping it will, that'll be the successor to Going to the Chapel. Not a sequel, but in that vein. Of just what do you get with the intersection of dysfunction and crime? That'll be this book. So yeah, it's just keeping busy. I know there's a lot of pressure in the comics industry to be constantly out with something new.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I've had to kind of unlearn, is being like, at the end of the day, no one cares when the book came out.
Right.
They care when they're holding the singles in their hand or they're holding the trade in their hand. Is it good?
Yep.
And that's sort of something that I won't compromise on. That's the thing that I'm like, the book has to be good, or I'll never be able to sleep at night.
Right.
And so I go to the mat all the time on that sort of thing. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun stuff in the hopper that I can't wait to show you all.
That's awesome. Well, if people want to follow along with what you're doing so they can find out, like, when you can shout it from the rooftops and you shout it from the rooftops, what's the best way for people that are watching or listening to this video to stay connected with what you're working on?
Well, you can follow me on social media. I'm at Twitter and Instagram at Pepose D. I'm a very heavy Twitter user. Or David Pepose Comics on Facebook. You can also subscribe to my newsletter, Pep Talks. I send that out every 3 weeks. That's at bit.ly/pep news. That you will get on the inside track of everything, including a lot of teases of some of this work that I've been teasing today. You can also visit my website, davidpepose.com. I've got a web store on there that's got all of my work on it. But yeah, also, if you're looking for any of my work, definitely back the Kickstarter. We will be doing a backer kit store similar to what we did in the previous campaign.
Okay.
So you can either buy all of my work discounted at various tiers in the Kickstarter, or you can buy it a la carte, on the backer kit. I will say there's some really fun rewards that we have in store for this Kickstarter. In addition to our main cover, we have 3 really cool variant covers. We've got package sets for all of it. We've got catch-up tiers for our first 2 issues. We've even got some 9 cover package sets. So if you want all of the variants, you can get that. We've got all of the trades for Spencer and Locke 2, Going to the Chapel, and Scout's Honor. We've got original art commissions from Ruben Rojas. We've got a chance to get drawn into the book. And the really fun things, I made a couple of handmade Spencer dolls for my creative team for Spencer and Locke. And we happen to have a couple extra. So we're offering those as rewards. And something that a lot of people have asked me about. Where do you get Scouts Honor Ranger Scout badges? And I will say that we have 3 complete sets of all 14 Ranger Scout badges that we will be offering as rewards for the OZ. So so those are some of the things we've got. We even have for the most dedicated Yellow Brick Road Warrior, I will even do a store signing anywhere in the continental US. That is our sort of our ultimate tier. You got to prove that the store is actually interested in this. Please don't, no misery here. But if anybody wants to do that, sort of COVID willing, we'll sign up for that as well. So but yeah, there's something for everybody. There's something for any and all levels of commitment, any and all levels of budget. Something I also want to put out there is even if you just do the $5 tier, which is just a thank you tier, we are including PDFs of the first issue of Spencer and Locke and Going to the Chapel with every single tier, because I want to make sure that people feel like they're getting bang for their buck. Yeah. I want to make sure that people feel like they're being heard, that people know that they're being appreciated for their work. And for contributing to our campaign. And I can tell you, even from the $10 tier, which is I think the minimum tier to get issue 2, we also are coming with behind the scenes materials. So you'll be able to get the script for the book. You'll be able to get the untouched inks and the untouched colors, because I want people to know that like we want to give you a lot of bang for your buck. Yeah. And that's before any stretch goals. And let me tell you, if the last campaign is any indication, we had more than 1,250 Yellow Brick Road Warriors joining us. The amount of stuff that everybody got with their order was kind of staggering. And so if you believe in us, if you back us, if you share this with your friends, it's going to pay off dividends for all of our backers. So please don't hesitate to spread the word.
That's awesome. Well, Dave, thank you so much for just taking some time to talk comics.
Thanks for having me.
I always love sitting down and chatting with you about comics. And gang, if you are not convinced at any point in this interview to go back the OZ, I don't know what else to do because it's awesome. You're gonna want to check it out for sure. So David, thank you so much just for taking some time though out of your day to talk about comics with me.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all your support. It really means
Yeah,
the world.
absolutely. With that being said, gang, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.